Moving through Alabama's 200-year history like a river is how Dr. Tessa Carr describes her original work, Alabama Love Stories, where every now and then we pull ashore and witness multiple perspectives about a given moment. Joining us to talk about this original work is Dr. Tessa Carr. So we're about to watch a portion of Alabama Love Stories. Which shore are we about to arrive at?
Well, in this section of the play, you're going to experience the civil rights era in Montgomery. And particularly, it's the very beginning of the civil rights actions. I certainly wouldn't say it's the beginning of the civil rights movement because, lots of things happen before we come to sort of civil unrest often. But this particular piece is about the sort of, in some way, parallel lives that were going on at this point in Alabama history in Montgomery, particularly the story of Juliet Hampton Morgan, who was a librarian in Montgomery, and Rosa Parks, who, as we know, was going to be one of the first people to take direct action in the civil rights movement, and also some of the beginnings of the story of Dr. King in his early years there in Montgomery. Lots of different texts pulled together in that moment, with some poetry woven in as well, and songs. So it's that chunk of time.
They said wait. Well, I waited. For 100 years I waited. In cotton fields, kitchens, balconies, in bread lines, at back doors, on chain gangs, in stinking colored toilets,
in crowded ghettos, outside of schools and voting booths. And some said later, and some said never. Then a new wind blew, and a new voice rode its wings with quiet urgency, strong, determined, sure.
No, it said. Not never, not later, not even soon. Now, walk. And other voices echoed the freedom words. Walk together, children. Don't get weary. Whispered them.
Sang them.
Prayed them. Shouted them. Walk. And I walked the streets of Montgomery until a link in the chain of patient acquiescence broke. Then again, sit down. And I sat at the counters for Greensboro.
Ride, and I rode the bus for freedom.
Kneel, and I got down on my knees in prayer and faith. March, and I'll march till the last chain falls, singing, we shall overcome.
Now all the dogs are hoses in Birmingham.
Now all the clubs and guns in Selma can turn this tide. Not all the jails can hide these young black faces from their destiny of manhood, of equality,
of dignity,
of the American dream. 100 years past due. Now.
We speak of a love which is expressed in the Greek word agape. Agape means understanding, redeeming goodwill for all men. It is an overflowing love which is purely spontaneous, unmotivated, groundless, and creative. It is not set in motion by any quality or object of its function. It is a love of God operating in the human heart. It is a love in which the individual seeks not his own good, but the good of his neighbor.
She knew exactly who she was, where she came from, and what her conscience compelled her to do.
Welcome. Can I help you?
Do you have any books on how to feed a horned toad?
That is just the kind of question our reference librarian, Miss Juliet Morgan, loves to try and answer. Hello, Miss Fisher. How may I help you? This young man has a question for you.
Where can I find more information on how to feed a horned toad?
Well, that sounds like a dangerous proposition. But I believe you'll find what you need on the fifth aisle to your right near the bottom shelf. Look in the 597s.
Do you have any references about genealogy?
That would be 929, third aisle to your left, bottom shelf.
Hi, do you know what a Republican is? My daddy says I don't need to know because I'll never be one.
There
but I can't.
I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus.
Segregation is an evil that has limited our horizons and dwarfed our souls. Are people really naive enough to believe that other people are happy, grateful to be pushed away and held back and told that they are inferior? They may take it for a long time, but not forever.
Perhaps Miss Morgan would find Harlem a more congenial atmosphere than that of her native Southland. And if so, I'm sure Montgomery would gladly buy her a one-way ticket.
There she goes again. Crazy old maid. Good riddance.
Tall, thin, peculiar.
Yes, she's satisfied now.
Good riddance.
Tall, thin, peculiar.
Yes, she's satisfied now.
Good riddance.
Tall, thin, peculiar.
Did you walk home again? Yes, Mama, I did. There you go, making a fool of yourself. It's going to be so that no decent white folk in Montgomery have anything to do with us. Nobody is going to do anything different just because you got off a bus. Juliet, I wish you would, because somebody other than yourself.
Agape is not a weak, passive love. It is a love in action. Agape is a love seeking to preserve and create community. It is a willingness to sacrifice in the interest of mutuality. It is a willingness to go to any length to preserve and restore community. Agape is a willingness to forgive, not 7 times, but 70 times 7 in order to restore community. Agape does not begin by discriminating between worthy and unworthy people.
No word from you. All right, let him sit.
Oh, it's fine.
I told you to get out.
No, I will not.
I'll have you arrested.
Just call the police.
Good evening. What seems to be the problem?
This colored woman wouldn't stand up.
Ma'am, would you please stand up?
I don't think I should.
You know what will happen if you don't.
How do you treat us like this?
I don't know. The law is the law, and you're under arrest.
You will not be treated like this anymore. You have a good evening, sir. I wasn't any more tired that day from work than I am any other day. I was tired of being treated like this.
Miss Parks,
Mr. Nixon, good of you to come down.
I've just paid your bail and I'll see you home.
Oh, thank you for that.
Rosa, I've got something to ask. You know we missed an opportunity with the arrest of Claudette Colvin several months ago. Your case could be what we need to mount a protest against our treatment on Montgomery's buses.
I'm not so sure about my name tied to something like that.
Miss Parks, think about it. Fred Gray would serve as your attorney. Why did you refuse to give up your seat?
I couldn't take it anymore. All right.
Joanne, it's E.D. Nixon. We've got the right case. Rosa Parks was arrested today for failing to stand for a white man. She was in the middle seating and not occupying a white seat. Her hearing is set for Monday, and we've got Fred Gray representing.
All right. It's time to boycott. While we are demanding humane treatment, we will not ride those buses. I've got volunteers who can make flyers tonight to get out into the community before Monday.
All right, I'll keep calling the ministers. Reverend King, I just bailed Rosa Parks out of jail for refusing to stand for a white man. The time has come. Only through a boycott can we make it clear to the white folks that we will not accept this type of treatment any longer. Dr. King, We've taken this type of thing too long already.
We need to hold a meeting. We can use Holt Street Baptist Church.
This flyer calls for a boycott to take place Monday, December 5th. We need to make as many flyers as possible to get out into the city tonight. I think we can make at least 5,000.
5,000 in one night. Is that even possible?
All things are possible with faith, but faith without action is dead, so let's get to work.
Reverend Abernathy.
Reverend Hubbard.
Reverend Allen.
Dr. Wilson.
Reverend Fields. We are asking for guaranteed courteous treatment by drivers. That we are seated first come, first served, with Negroes seated from the back of the bus towards the front and whites seated from the front towards the back. That all Negro bus operators will be hired for predominantly black routes. Now, we'll have all this information and more at the Holt Street Baptist Church meeting.
Good evening. We'll let you in.
How you doing, Joanne?
There comes a time that people get tired. We are here this evening to say to those that have mistreated us so long that we are tired. Tired of being segregated and humiliated.
Amen.
Tired of being kicked about by the brutal feet of oppression. One of the great glories of democracy is the right to protest for rights. We are protesting for the birthright of justice in the community. Love will be the regulating ideal.
Yes.
We will be guided by the highest principles of law and order, emphasizing the Christian doctrine of love. We will be guided by the deepest principles of our Christian faith. Love will be the regulating ideal. We must hear the words of Jesus echoing across the centuries.
Love your enemies.
Bless them that curse you and pray for them that despitefully use you.
Amen.
If we fail to do this, our protest will end up as a meaningless drama on the stage of history. In spite of the mistreatment that we have confronted, we must not become bitter and end up by hating our white brothers. As Booker T. Washington said, let no man pull you apart so low to make you hate someone.
Amen.
If we protest courageously, and yet with dignity and Christian love, when the history books are written in future generations, historians will have to pause and say, there lived a great people
A black people.
who injected new meaning and dignity into the veins of civilization. This is our challenge and our overwhelming responsibility.
Amen.
All right, first of all, we charge your price.
To the Montgomery Advertiser. Not since the first Battle of the Marne has the taxi been put to as good use as it has this last week in Montgomery. However, the spirit animating our Negro citizens as they ride those taxis or walk from the heart of Cloverdale to Mobile Road has been more like Gandhi than that of the taxicab army that saved Paris. As you remember, Gandhi set out on his salt march from Sabarmati to the sea, about 150 miles, as a boycott against the government's salt monopoly. He vowed that he would not return until India was independent. Depending on their point of view, people laughed, sneered, or shook their heads. But 17 years later, India was free. Passive resistance combined with freedom from hate is a force to be reckoned with. The Negroes of Montgomery's task is greater than Gandhi's, however, for they have greater prejudice to overcome. One feels that history is being made in Montgomery these days, the most important in her career. It is hard to imagine a soul so dead, a heart so hard, a vision so blinded and provincial, as to not be moved with admiration at the quiet dignity, discipline, and dedication with which the Negroes have conducted their boycott.
Walk with me, Lord. Oh, walk with me.
Walk with me.
Walk with me, Lord. Oh, walk with me.
Walk with me.
on the legality of this boycott. They make me think of that famous one that turned America from a tea to a coffee-drinking nation. Come to think of it, one might say that this nation was founded on a boycott. Instead of acting like sullen adolescents whose attitude is make me, we ought to be working to span the gap between segregation and integration to extend public services, schools, libraries, parks, and transportation to Negro citizens.
Juliet, this has to stop. We're receiving daily complaints, threats to the budget of the library, and people are beginning to say that you are a communist and a bad influence on children.
I can sympathize with their fear. I'm suffering the cuts from old friends, the ringing telephone with anonymous voices. I know how it feels when the butterflies in your stomach turn to buzzards.
Juliet, for your own sanity and safety, please stop.
All right, but only because of the threat to the library.
Walk with me. 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 Watch yourself. Walk with me. 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 Walk with me.
Miss Morgan, and this is Buford Boone with the Tuscaloosa News. Thank you for your personal letter responding to my speech at the White Citizens Council meeting.
That was a very brave thing to do.
Miss Morgan, your voice is an important and unique one, and I want to ask your permission to reprint your letter to me in its entirety.
Mr. Boone, I am flattered, but I have promised certain people that I will no longer publish any of my beliefs.
Miss Morgan, if that is your wish, I will honor it.
Well, I wouldn't say that it was my wish exactly.
Miss Morgan, I ask you again, may I publish this urgent call for action?
Yes. Yes, you can. Dear Publisher Boone, please accept my warmest congratulations and most sincere gratitude for your wise and courageous speech at the White Citizens meeting in Tuscaloosa last Friday. There are many Southerners from various walks of life who know that you are right. They know that what they call our Southern way of life must inevitably change. Many of them are even eager for it to change, but they are afraid to express themselves. So afraid to stand out alone, to walk out naked. Everyone who speaks as you do who has the faith to do what he believes is right in scorn of the consequences, does great good in preparing the way for a happier and more equitable future for all Americans. You help redeem Alabama's very bad behavior in the eyes of the nation and the world. I had begun to wonder if there were any men in the state, any white men, with any sane evaluation of our situation here in the middle of the 20th century, and most especially with any moral courage to express it. I know men, lawyers, teachers, merchants, librarians, men and women of good sense and goodwill. But so far as standing up and being counted for, well, they were happy for the Hungarian freedom fighters to have all the courage and all the glory. I am ashamed that men and women of good sense and goodwill have let power pass by default into the hands of those like the White Citizens Council. It is time to get on with a job that we have put off far too long. Full citizenship, equal rights, and respect for all people. If the university in its halls of learning has any lesson more important than that, I am unaware of it.
With this statement, Juliet Morgan, controversial employee of the local library, continues her work there, although most of the board want her dismissed due to her interracial views. Members of the board are listed below. Why not write them your feelings in this touchy matter? White Citizens Council States' Rights Advocate.
She knew exactly who she was, where she came from, and what her conscience compelled her to do.
I'm tired. Raymond and me, we can't find work. We can't find solace. We can't find peace. You asked for a face, and I gave you a face, my face. And yet you see my tears, and you turn your back on me. Suppose it's time I move on. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. The world behind me.
Shame.
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 The world behind me. The cross before.
As mayor of Montgomery, it is within my purview to cut library appropriations. Well, I finally figured out a way to fire Miss Juliet Morgan without violating any civil service law. Library appropriations for next year are cut by exactly the amount of her salary.
I still shall follow. No, no, go with me. I still shall follow. So none go with me. I still shall follow. No turning back. No turning back. I have decided.
Think not that in the king's palace that you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep your silence in such a time as this, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another quarter. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this.
No turning back.
Agape is recognition of the fact that all life is interrelated. All of humanity is involved in a single process, and all men are brothers. To the degree that I am harming my brother, no matter what he is doing to me, to that extent, I'm harming myself.
So the concept from this play began in what I think might be the most Southern way possible, a conversation about someone's Aunt Betty. How did it go from that conversation over coffee to a full-length play that explores the many eras of Alabama history?
Well, it went so the initial conversation was between myself and Mark Wilson, who's the director of the Caroline Marshall Drawn Center for the Arts and Humanities, which is also part of the College of Liberal Arts. And Mark and I have worked together on a previous project about the desegregation of Tuskegee High School. And so the Drawn Center has a series of letters from Byron Yarborough, whose family lived in the house, Pebble Hill, that is the Drawn Center location. And these letters, while some of them were from Byron Yarborough, that's not how they came into Mark's possession. So they actually came into Mark's possession through Alabama archivist who found her Aunt Betty's letters upon Betty's death, as she was the executor of Betty's estate, found in the attic at Betty's house a stack of letters with a ribbon tied around them in the attic, blue envelopes, and I've quickly realized that those envelopes, those letters, were letters that her Aunt Betty had written to Byron Yarborough during World War II. They had never met, but they fell in love through these letters. So what we had of the letters was we had Byron's letters to Betty, where Betty had saved all of them. And then we had a stack of return to sender letters that were letters that came back to Betty after Byron's sad death in the Pacific. So we never had Betty's original letters to Byron that he was responding to. And so Mark asked me to look through these letters and see if there was a story there. Well, there was a story there, but there was definitely a story there. There was a beautiful story there, but it was a question of how would we make this story come to life with some kind of sense of the relationship that developed. And we did that by going through those letters and coding them very carefully for concepts that came up, themes that recurred, like family, love, religion, football, Southern life, back home, what's happening back home, what's happening in the war that they can talk about, because Brian was also the censor for the ship that he was on. And then after sort of coding those, I could take pieces from Betty's later letters that did correspond thematically and also to the depth of feeling of Byron's early letters, and cut those together so that we saw the relationship unfold between them. So it was still nothing but Byron and Betty's language. So that was for the initial thing. And then we started thinking about, well, what about other things that might be in the archive? What about other pieces that are in the archive that haven't been able to be brought to life in a way that gets them outside of the archive, right? So from there, it became, Mark reached out to archivists at the State Archive, and said, hey, could we come and look at some things? And so they prepared basically a big sort of open list of, like, here are collections that we have that we think might have stories of love within them. It's hard to say exactly because there's lots of ephemera in these collections sometimes. I mean, sometimes it's letters, sometimes it's things gathered from a lifetime. So we went through a lot of collections. Myself and Richard Trammell worked as a research assistant for me for a summer. We went through a lot of collections that didn't work at all, trying to figure out how do we both represent a kind of, as much as we can, a breadth of what's in the archive, a breadth of representation of Alabamians, and a breadth of types of love. Because it wasn't just Betty and Byron's story is one of the few sort of straightforward romantic love stories that's in the production. So then from there, it took a lot of hours. Is how it became a full-length play. A lot of hours, and a lot of careful reading of text. Because when you're working with archival documents, when you're working with things that are artifacts from people's lives, I was trained as a performance ethnographer and also as an working with oral history. It's very important that you don't take things out of context to the point where you might tell a compelling story, but you're not really being as truthful as you can to all of the context that you know surrounds the story. So that becomes another layer of the careful editing you have to do that, quite frankly, sometimes works well to create compelling performance and other times does not. So what I do is err on the side of the ethical choice of how I cut rather than the performance, what might be the most performance powerful choice. And sometimes, you regret that only because there are times where it just doesn't work as well. And I'll speak to one section in the play real quick for that, where I think that happened, which is in the Civil War section, because when you're dealing with Civil War documents are short. Usually letters are short. There's not a lot of exciting topics going on. And in order to really kind of suss out the difference in the material lived conditions of the people living through the war, it manifests in small details like what you got to eat, what you were able to be delivered from your family versus what someone in a different rank was being able to be delivered in their family. And of course, we're just talking about white families at this point, right? So what we were trying to do in that section was to show a kind of breadth of experience of family, of what those families were going through the separation, as well as looking at the perspective of enslaved people with the documentation that we had remaining, and post-war, formerly enslaved people who were trying to find their families in that post-war era. So with that, I would say there was repetition that a modern audience, a contemporary audience, doesn't always get, is there very intentionally to show where both there was similarity and where there was tremendous difference. So that's a section that I would say I would grapple with. Again, I don't want to go back to it. Don't get me wrong. We've done this piece, but I learned a lot in that about, okay, some of this fine detail of historical work cannot be as realized in a stage production that's dealing with epistolary forms as well as you could with, a film that you could show all those details and you'd never have to speak them at all, right?
Now, once you decided this was a project that you had to pursue, how did you bring it to life? What was that research process like?
My background is in both theater and performance studies. And within performance studies, one of the things we love is to mash up text, all kinds of text. What I considered this to be is a form of collaged performance. We used a lot of shortcuts through music. We used shortcuts through poetry. We used narration shortcuts also to help weave together. We used projection of imagery, language. We would project the artifacts also during the scenes up above. We projected the titles to help weave the pieces together. So, and I also set out very clearly in the program note to say, hey, this is not comprehensive. We are looking at collage snapshots that are coming through, right? That's what we're getting. And that's what I wanted the audience to be clear about. I also tried very hard to remember and remind the audience that this was work about bringing sort of our documentation of our lives to life again. And in that, tried to make each chunk similar to the document that it was based on. So Juliet Hampton Morgan's life is really based on this elaborate scrapbook that her mother kept after her death. And when you see the piece, you can see these pieces of a scrapbook layering in that were all around on the pages, right? Letters tried to be a sort of back and forth, like a letter exchange would have been. So the communicative layers were there too. So I wouldn't necessarily say it was. I think people. I would say this. I think people really went with the idea that we were flowing through history, and that you had to take each one discreetly, and you also had to be open to the idea that this was a broad look at forms of love also. And everyone did not agree with that. And that's okay too, right? So, it wasn't without its difficulty in sort of making those points at times.
Now, I know you took special care with creating this production to pay attention to how events were portrayed, and you wanted to ensure that you were inclusive of the diversity of perspectives of historical events that have made Alabama what it is. Why was that so important to you during the process of writing this?
Well, it's part of the whole, my whole personal perspective in creating performance is to try to think about how performance can show us the possibilities of utopia. Not that I'm certainly not a naive person, but I do believe that performance can show us, it can bring us together in a communal, democratic, civic, public space, and we can share things together that we might not share in any other particular moment or way. And we can say things poetically, we can say things straightforwardly, and we can look back at each other while we do that, right? So for me, this project was always about that. Now, the archive complicates that, and the archive owns its complication in that it is not a very representative repository of Alabamians' experience. It's very limited, and it knows that. They're working on that, but it's years to go, right, to be more inclusive. So that's why having to go outside of the archive happened in quite a few instances. So, and I also think that as part of our land grant mission, it's our job to serve all Alabamians, right? That's our job. And as that job, I always feel very strongly that representation matters, and it matters that we bring as many perspectives and possibilities to the table as possible to look back at our past, but also to look at our past and think about how we might want to go forward. What can we look at and say, oh, that's something from that I hadn't actually thought about, and performances like this give us an opportunity to kind of dig in and underneath to a degree, I think. So, yeah, it's always important to me to try and create a wider field of representation.
Dr. Carr, thank you for joining us and sharing your talent with us. Our celebration continues in just 1 minute.